Welcome back to the Reclaiming Creativity Summit. Today I have Lauree Ostrofsky with us, and I'm so excited. Lauree is an author, coach, speaker, a hugger who helps women leap into more meaningful careers and businesses. Her books are Simply Leap, a happy how-to about facing fear and enjoying the crap out of your life, and I'm Scared and Doing It Anyway, about her own reinvention after being diagnosed with a brain tumor. Lauree is also the founder of Hudson Valley Women in Business, with nearly 3,000 women business owners in the region north of New York City, leaning on and learning from one another. Find out more at simplyleap.com and at simplyleap on social media. Lauree, thank you so much for being a part of the summit. It is wonderful to have you.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be part of this. Thank you. And I
Yes.
love this topic. This is a topic we need to talk about.
I know. I feel like I could talk about creativity all day long, backwards and forwards.
Luckily, you are.
Luckily, I am. So, Laura, you and I met up in Rhinebeck, New York at Omega at a women's leadership conference during my personal year of travel. And we were sitting down at a dinner table one night at the big mess hall, and you and I were talking. And you were telling me a little bit about your story, and I've been working on a book for quite some time, and you might have even had two books published at that time. And I remember asking you how it came about that you ended up writing your book, and you talked about taking, I think, blog posts, maybe?
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you more about that process, but I'm so curious. You have such a beautiful story about how you ended up where you are. And it's a little bit of a longer story, but I'm wondering if you can give us the Cliff Notes version of your background, how you ended up being scared and doing it anyway, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. So like the shortest answer I can give is that I became a writer. Well, at first I became a speaker. As an introvert, that's like a crazy thing to do, but I became a speaker and then I became an author because I finally had I had a story that I had and needed to share. And then it propelled me through whatever the discomfort and fear was around sharing that story and being in front of people, whether in book form or on stage. And the story is really that I was diagnosed with a brain tumor at 28. The kind of the shorter version of that is that I was a very healthy, 28-year-old, 27-year-old, and then came down with what I thought was an ear infection. When regular medication wouldn't go away, they did an MRI and found that I had a brain tumor behind my right inner ear. And through, it's kind of that moment that so many of us have at different points in our lives where the path we think we're on, the things that we think we have control over, is suddenly the veil is lifted. Suddenly it's like, oh, actually, I don't have control over the things I thought I did. And this path I thought I was on is taking this sudden turn that I have to go down. And sometimes we get to choose that path that we go down in a new way. And sometimes the path is like, okay, so I'm going to go down this road. And so that diagnosis, I can imagine being in the doctor's office now, but that diagnosis really changed. Up until that point, I had been what I call an A student, which is trying to do right by everybody in my life, trying to make my parents proud and make my employers happy, and finding the right thing to do. And then suddenly it was like, wait, I had done all of the right things, and then this happens. So maybe I need to do the things that are serving me as well. And that's like kind of through the tumor and luckily through the surgeries, I'm well now, which is great. But through those surgeries, I learned that what real fear is, and the fear of telling someone I love you, or quitting your job, or disappointing someone, totally not as scary as being in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And so that's when scared and doing it anyway happened. It's like, okay, I am scared and I'm going to have to go into the hospital. I am scared and I'm going to have to quit my job. And I am scared of getting on stage, but it's too important to talk about what I learned from my brain tumor, which is facing fear and how much power we have. Even from in a hospital bed, I learned how much power I have to affect change in my life. So I chose positivity through that experience. I chose to let my body do what it needed to. There was a real pivotal moment that I share in my book around what happened in that hospital bed, and that's what kind of propelled me forward. Like, it's too important to talk about how we can affect these major changes on our lives. For me to be afraid and to sit at home and like, okay, I'm not going to be in front of people, even though I'm an introvert. I'm not going to write this and have people read about my personal life and my stories, my divorce and things like that. It's too important to help people change their lives for the better. And so that's, I would say, like, you kind of asked a couple questions in there. So
I did. And that is so powerful. I mean, but I should back us up a little bit too. I know that before you got the brain tumor, you had been in a job that you just felt like something was, is this putting words in your mouth? Something was missing, like something wasn't quite right. And you actually had the courage to ask your boss if you could take some time off, and you like went and traveled the world.
Yes. So that was literally 1 year before I was diagnosed. So you have to imagine, this is the A student me going like, oh gosh, I don't want to, I don't know how to ask for this time off. And then realizing like, well, what could go wrong if I just ask for time off? We had the way the company I was working in marketing in New York City. And the way the company was set up was that we had this bank of days. And I thought, well, like, I don't know, other people have gotten married and taken their bank of days as a honeymoon. Well, I'm single. And so couldn't I take the bank of days in one fell swoop and like take it as a leave? And so I finally built up the courage and asked my bosses like, hey, so I have like 4 weeks saved up. Could I take all of them? And then could I take another 2 weeks unpaid? And they thought about it and they said yes. And then they came back a couple days before my trip, actually, before I was leaving for 6 weeks on a sabbatical. They said, well, actually, we checked our HR guidelines, and we have to actually pay you the whole time. So we're going to pay you for those 2 weeks that you were going to be great. So then I was getting a paycheck the whole time. So it was great. So it was like, I felt like the universe was so much saying like, yeah, you can do this. And we're going to do a little bump even to say, yeah, go. So like, that was kind of the start of the inkling of, oh, you mean I can just ask for something. I can be brave. And I can imagine my life or this 6 week period of time to be different than anyone else had done before. And then amazingly, a year later, something I wouldn't have imagined happened. But yeah, I knew I was unhappy. I knew something else would be a better fit for me. And I didn't know what it was. And I was thinking about quitting. And then my brain tumor happened, and luckily I had great health insurance. And then after my surgeries, it became clear that I couldn't quite go back to commuting every day yet. And so that became a great opportunity for me to leave at that point, in a place where it didn't feel scary as much to leave on those terms. Like, okay, I faced the scariest thing. And now leaving this, okay, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but I know I'm going to be okay. And that, that felt differently. It feels different when we feel like we have some kind of stability underneath us. And usually that stability comes from inside. when we know the doing it anyway that comes with scared and doing it anyway comes from our own stability and groundedness.
I'm going to take a detour with us for a second before I bring us back to the creativity connection.
Yeah.
Because there's something in your story that I'm really curious about. So I also quit a full-time job to build a business from the ground up, which is a very scary thing. And it's had consequences. It's had positive consequences and negative consequences. And it's all of those things. It's a mixed bag. However, my dad died really unexpectedly this year, and I could not have imagined after that going back to so I'd already quit my job, but like the idea of going back after something so clearly has a before and after moment, like
Yep.
Your brain tumor was clearly a before and after moment. Like life is going to be completely different than it was before. And I'm wondering how, having had the courage to take that 6-week sabbatical, how did that inform you after? Does that make sense? Like, did it make you feel better? Because like after my dad died, I was like, at least I'm not going back to that gray cubicle. Like,
Yeah.
So did your time and the courage that you gained from like taking that very off course detour, did it help you? Do you feel like, and if so, how?
Yeah. Okay. So interesting. If we could like roll back the tape, I would tell this in a, hopefully everyone else gets the nonlinear nature of this story. But yeah, if I could go back to what happened right after the sabbatical. So I'm away for 6 weeks. I'm traveling around Europe, meeting friends and new people along the way. When I get back, it's like the letdown. It's like, the day after Christmas morning and you're like, okay, well, what else? What else do we have? But also like, there's the knowledge that the world is out there, that there's so much more than the gray cubicle. So you come back and the cubicle is even smaller than it was before. But also but I think what happened was that I was bigger. Like the cubicle was the same, but I was bigger. And so I came back. There were a couple really interesting and exciting things at work. And then I started to realize, okay, this isn't it. And now I have a better sense and a better strength and stability to know that this isn't it. And, there's a real power in leaving on your own terms.
Yes.
And so I think that that's the gift that I got by coming back to the cubicle. Was like, oh, okay, now I know why it doesn't fit. Like I had this sense of like, this really isn't, I don't think this is it, or I feel like there's something more, but I didn't have words for it.
Right.
And I think going away and coming back gave me more words. And then the timing of the tumor, I just feel so grateful because again, I didn't give notice for some reason. Who knows why? Oh, it's because this was going to happen and I was going to have this amazing health insurance, and how lucky am I to have had that, especially in the era of health insurance that we're in now. So how lucky that I had that kind of stability. And then again, could still leave on my own terms with the strength of that. So I think that things happen I don't know, it just seems too coincidental not to be the right path, the path I was supposed to be taking.
Oh yeah, I love that. Lauree, your story, I just find it so inspiring. So thank you for sharing all of that background with us about who you are and how you've gotten to where you are. And I'm going to circle back to the book question that I started with, but I wonder, what does creativity mean to you?
I have to say the reason why I went on the sabbatical was because, and I had just started working with a coach. Actually, I started working with a coach, and she and I were the ones who came up with this idea of the sabbatical. But I hired this coach because I said that I wanted to be more creative without leaving my day job. I mean, of course, then I ended up leaving my day job, but I wanted to reclaim some kind of creativity because I had minored in art in high school and college, and had taken these classes on the side. And I was just like, where is creativity in my life? I wanted to find that. And so that's what we ended up exploring. And then the travel ended up being part of my creative journey. So, oh my gosh, I just forgot the question you asked. Is it, what's creativity mean to me?
Yeah.
Okay. So creativity, so through that process, I learned that creativity is a way of seeing the world. And when I work with clients, that's how we talk about it. So whether you're a writer or an artist, so many of us, once we like try to call ourselves like, I'm a writer, I'm an author, like these have such big names attached to them. We kind of move the line like, real writers write every day, or real writers have been published more than once, or, you know, like we keep having this line that we move out in front of us. And I think creativity actually is the step back. It's who you are to start from, which is how you see the world. You see the world in colors and shapes, and you appreciate these little moments that you capture, you know, when you're riding the subway and see two people look at one another across the subway, or I really like plants. And so like, I'll be walking outside and one leaf on a tree will be waving, you know, that like when you're walking, suddenly like there are all leaves on a tree, but one is kind of moving. And I wave because I feel like that's the tree waving and I want to wave back. I feel like that's creativity. So I seek that out in my life all the time.
I love that. So, okay, let's circle back to the book question. So can you tell folks, I mean, I think it was your first book that you wrote.
Yes.
You had a process with note cards. Can you talk to folks about what that process was?
Yeah, absolutely. So I need to give credit to David Hicks, who is also a writer and author and a dear friend of mine. He and I co-host writing retreats in Colorado. And so I had become a speaker first because I realized that talking about the brain tumor is an opportunity to, it's like saying breast cancer or a heart attack or something. When you say something like brain tumor, people hear you. People really listen for another 5 minutes. And it's like, well, what can you do with that 5 minutes then? In that 5 minutes, you can help people change their lives or open a door for them that maybe they didn't think was possible. So that was kind of why I went around being a speaker for a while, to kind of explore that and see what happens in person. But I wanted to take what I'd learned about telling my story with the brain tumor and into a writing form, because I'm more a natural writer than I am a speaker. And so I called up my friend David and I was like, okay, so I think I actually want to write a book, but can I do, this is a few years ago. So I was like, can I do the cheater method? Like Sex and the City was on at that point. I was like, can I do the Carrie Bradshaw method, where she basically linked all of her, I think she was a writer with a column, like a column in like a New York paper. And she, like, her book was like all of her columns put together in a book. And I was like, what if you could put all my blog posts together? Could I just make that a book? And thank goodness David is a great teacher and a really good friend, because he basically was like, okay, yeah, you can do that. He goes, here's what you do. You take all of your blog posts and you list each one on an individual blank index card. And then the front of the index card, you list like the title of the book and like a couple salient things about it. On the back of each of the index cards, list a couple themes that you think fit with this particular blog post. He goes, write them all out, flip all the cards over, and organize them by themes. By what are the themes that these all have in common. Goes, flip the cards over again, open a Word document, and organize, cut and paste the blog posts in each of the themes, because those themes are now your chapters. Those are the names of each of your chapters, and the blog posts in order can go into those chapters. And he said, by the end of that, you have the length of a book. He's like, you have written a book already. You can see that you've written a book already. And he said, okay, then close that Word document, open a second one, use the same chapter headings, and write write the same thing, write from beginning to the end with your story, and then see which one you like better. And of course I like the one that I wrote from beginning to end, but seeing that I had already produced something of that length made it less daunting to start with a blank page.
Wow. That makes me want to come on your writing retreat.
Yes, we do. We do a little bit of that. Yeah. It's pretty fun. Yeah. He's got like a wall of his, like, cause he actually splits his down. So he's a fiction writer, and he splits the scenes of his book down on cards, because then he can move them around. Like, okay, so if this scene happened earlier in the book, how would that change the scenes that come next? So he can visually see that before he does it either in writing or on his laptop.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. I think that's going to be really useful for a lot of folks. And I think if they find that useful, they need to sign up for your writing retreat and go
yes.
with you and make those book dreams come to fruition.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll be on one too.
Yay.
So do you have any creative rituals?
Yeah. It's interesting because when I was, I think I described before, when I was moving the level, like, oh, I'm not a real writer. Like the one that got me was writing every day, because like real writers, actually David is one of those. He writes at very specific times, and I'm like, I think I'm more of like a binge writer where, my second book I wrote in a month. And
wow.
So truth be told, my books are small, but small and mighty. But the second book was really, I had gotten to the point where I kind of knew who I wanted to talk to, and I knew exactly what I wanted to say. And so I just busted through it, and I wrote the first draft in a month. It took me another year or so to edit and prepare it and things to be published. I self-published, but it's still like the month. So I feel like that's the way I am. So I would say my rituals are more giving myself a break. Like not giving myself a hard time is a really good ritual. And also I would say mornings for me. I actually just wrote this morning. One was last week I called up David and I said, this next book is not writing itself. I'm going to need deadlines. And so he and I are now bartering, which is what we did for my two previous books, where I coach him on his writing, and every 2 weeks I send him whatever I've written. And yeah, so we're starting next week. And so this morning I woke up and I'm like, it's a little early. I'm not going to start work yet. Oh, you know what? I'm going to write. I'm going to write for a half hour. And so the ritual is as early as possible in my day to write. It's like working out, to write, work out. And if I haven't done it in 2 weeks, to give myself a break.
Yeah, that's such a great advice. That whole idea of like, it's almost like you're saying like, give yourself a break to throw the rules out, because you might need to write your own rules.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to when you asked like what creativity means to me. If I see creativity as me waving at leaves on a tree, or enjoying the sunshine coming through the window, then I'm already in the creative process. I'm already writing when I'm not in front of my computer.
Right.
Like that is part of the process. Like I know that I'm doing research so my next book is about how women do business differently, because I work with a lot of women business owners. And so I know that part of my research is when I'm in a networking situation with women business owners, or when I'm coaching one of my clients and they're talking about whatever their struggle is with building their business. As you said, when when you leap into, I'm leaving my cubicle and I'm really going for it, there's a lot of stuff that happens there. Well, my conversations with my clients around that is research for what I'm going to be writing. So I also look at research in a really open-ended way.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. How do you feel like creativity helps you connect to your inner wise woman?
I like that. I love the inner wise woman. whenever I kind of read, I read an email from you about that and hear you say it, I just sit up taller. Because I don't know if I've claimed her until you remind me to claim her.
Oh,
So thank you for that.
you are so welcome.
I'm not the only one. I'm sure that your readers and listeners feel that way too. It's like, oh, she's in there, right? If you're asking about her, she's got to be in there. Where is she? Um, so creativity helps me remember that I have something to say and that I have a special way of saying it. I think that one of the demons that can haunt most of us as writers or an artist of any kind is that it's already been done
Mm.
or somebody else said it better. And the other thing that my inner wise woman says is that so most writers will tell you like, oh, I read everything in my genre as I'm writing to kind of understand what's out there. And I'm like, and I do the exact opposite. I do not read anything in that genre. I will read YA fiction while writing my nonfiction book about women doing business differently. Because if I'm reading a book in that genre, I feel like that voice gets in my head, and my inner wise woman knows that I need to be as quiet as possible to let that voice, my own voice, be really clear about what I'm saying.
Yes.
And the other thing is quiet, so I like wear earplugs all the time. But yeah, I feel like creativity helps my inner. They have a conversation. Creativity and the inner wise woman like have a conversation about, you know what you want to say, so you say it your way first,
Mm-hmm.
and then look at what's out there if you need to. But you don't need to hear those words before you find your own.
Oh, you are so wise. Thank you for sharing that.
Friend.
Is there anything else you would like to share with those listening?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I would like to share that um, just because you've been scared and doing it anyway, or you've leaped once before, or twice before, or 10 times before, it doesn't make the next one any easier. And I'm really sorry that that's true. I'm sorry for myself, and I'm sorry for everybody else. So if it feels like, gosh, I've already figured this out once before, why is this as hard as the first story or the first book or the first painting or the first day of owning a business? It's like, it's because it's a new place. It's a new level of that you're reaching. And so of course the fear is going to come back again. And the other thing that I want to say about fear is that it's such a sign that you're on the right track. So many of us will say like, oh, fears, oh, well, maybe it means I'm not supposed to do that. Well, actually, it may instead be a sign that you're supposed to go in that direction. Because if you weren't scared, you wouldn't want it that hard. You wouldn't want it that much. Easy things aren't scared because you don't really care either way if you get them. Hard things are scary, and things that you desire are scary because they're really important to you. So also when I talk about shifting our relationship with fear, it's also recognizing that it as a sign that you should keep going.
Ah, that is really powerful. And I think you're 100% right. That I 100% think that it is a sign to, I mean, none of us are actually being chased by like tigers, right?
Right.
So like that fear that comes up, like you're right, it does mean that something's really important to us. So thank you. And I think you have a free gift for everyone.
I do. So I get asked a lot by clients about their to-do list because I tend to work with A students who like valued third grade and like the structure of third grade. I know exactly what I need to do in order to get an A or a gold star. And in real life, we're looking for that too. As adults, we still want an A. And our to-do list ends up being a way that we can give ourselves an A. Like when you cross those things off, it feels so good. And The problem is that most of us then, like I said, moving the line as an artist, we move the line by adding more to our to-do list before giving us ourselves the joy of completing our to-do list. So I'm sharing the to-do list that I use myself, which is actually a very basic Word document, but it simplifies what you have in front of you, so that way you can give yourself a win at the end of the day, because that's what we need to know, that we're actually done. Because when you work for yourself, especially when you work from home, but when you work for yourself, it's like, oh, I'm never done. There's always more to do. And actually in corporate jobs, it's probably the same. So there's always more to do. But how do we give ourselves a win, and say like, oh, I'm done for the day. I did what I set it out to do, and I'll be ready for tomorrow. And I think that when we're looking for how are we going to fit writing into our lives or art into our lives, that works the same way. It's like,
Yeah.
how do I put this on my to-do list in a way that I'm actually going to do it? And so I think that this is going to narrow your focus enough where writing gets to be on that list and checked off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Lauree, thank you so much for
Oh, thank
being a part of
you.
the summit.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.